Hi, everyone. Welcome to Harvard University Dining Services Crimson Kitchen. As you just heard, this session is being recorded. I'm going to turn it over to Emily Bridges, our registered dietitian, in just a moment. If you have questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. I'm going to keep an eye on that and help Emily by moderating this session. Emily, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. All right, hi everybody. Thanks for joining me today. As Krista mentioned, I'm the registered dietitian here at Harvard Dining. So today we're going to talk a little bit about vegetables, different variety of vegetables, and then make a recipe featuring some frozen vegetables and talk about some ways to incorporate kind of frozen vegetables and canned vegetables into cooking at home. So as a reminder, I wanted to bring us back to the healthy eating plate that Harvard has out for as a recommendation for everyone. So obviously, you know, fruits and vegetables, they make up half of our plate when we think about making our meals. So they're a really important part of our diet. You know, we want to aim for about 2 to 3 cups a day of vegetables. And, you know, aside from the health benefits that I'll talk about in a little bit, just filling up your plate with fruits and vegetables is a great way to kind of fill up in general on nutrient-dense foods, which leaves less room for maybe unhealthier components that you might have in your meal. So it's a great way to kind of feel full, get all your nutrients in all at once. So a little bit about vegetables in general. It's a huge topic, obviously, so I'm just going to kind of give you the highlights. But if you have really specific questions, just let me know. It's really no surprise that, you know, vegetables have a lot of different nutrient components that are really important for us. Vitamins, minerals, things like fiber. They include both fat-soluble vitamins and water-soluble vitamins. So fat-soluble ones are kind of absorbed and they're transported in a way that's in the body, similar to how fats are absorbed and transported in the body. And then water-soluble vitamins, which are, you know, absorbed in water, soluble in water. So you got vitamin A, D, E, and K, and those are your fat-soluble vitamins. So vitamin A will keep your eyes and your skin healthy, protects against infections. They're naturally found in a lot of animal foods, but the body can actually convert vegetable forms of vitamin A that you might find in dark leafy greens, orange and yellow fruits, into vitamin A. So like beta carotene, those things will be converted into vitamin A in your body. Vitamin D is really good for bone health because it promotes calcium absorption. So you'll find it also in a lot of animal foods, but you'll also find it in fortified milks, like soy milks and grains and cereals, especially. So if you're a vegetarian or a vegan even, you could find it in those types of products. Also, you obviously get it from sunlight as well. Your body can convert it to vitamin D in the body. And then vitamin E is an antioxidant. So you'll find that in a lot of veggie oils, some nuts and seeds and whole grains. So not really animal products, but more vegetable products and grains. And vitamin K is for blood clotting. It's synthesized actually by your gut bacteria, which is a reason to keep your gut bacteria in good function, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But you also can get it from dark leafy green vegetables like the ones we're using today. And then, so you also get a lot of minerals from these vegetables. So things like folate, which is really an important mineral because it helps us form red blood cells. And it's especially important for women that are pregnant or trying to get pregnant just because it's associated with a decreased risk of neural tube defects and spina bifida and all those things. It's fortified in, at least in America, in our grains, just because they did find it was a nutrient of concern for people. And potassium is another important one because it is something that most Americans are deficient in just with our Western diet, because it is found in a lot of fruits and vegetables, and unfortunately the Western diet isn't high in fruits and vegetables. So that helps regulate our fluid balance, muscle contractions, which includes your heart. So it's a really important thing for you to have a good intake of. So things like sweet potatoes, white potatoes, beans, tomato products, as well as spinach, avocados, lentils, those things are going to be high in potassium. Bananas, that's not a vegetable. And then in general, so diet's high in vegetables. So if you compare people that have a diet low in vegetables and then a diet higher in vegetables, those that have a higher intake of vegetables have a lower incidence of many different diseases, but especially cancer, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, diabetes. And as a final, or as a little tidbit, I always find that, you know, the more, I always say, like, you know, the more color, the better. So like eat the rainbow in terms of the vegetables that you put on your plate, because the different colors are kind of indicative of different types of phytochemicals in the plant. And a phytochemical is essentially, it's a plant chemical that makes up the taste, the color, the smell of the vegetable. So you know that these are really important components of, you know, they're implicated a lot with different health benefits. So they include things like beta carotene, lycopene, resveratrol, things like that. And so by eating a wide array of different color vegetables, you're assuring that you're getting a huge variety of these different phytochemicals, which is really important. And also, as much as you can, try to get your fruits and your vegetables in whole form. So avoiding things like juices, because you're taking away a lot of the fiber components of it that you essentially you do have some vitamins and minerals in there, but you're also ending up with a lot of sugar that is not negated by the fiber. And speaking of fiber, so it's another nutrient of concern for Americans. Well, not a nutrient, but like a component of our diet that's of concern for Americans, just because we don't have a diet that's very high in vegetables and whole grains. So the goal for women is to aim for about 25 grams a day with a minimum of 30 for men. So it's a little bit higher for men. And most Americans really don't meet that, unfortunately. And you can, of course, exceed that amount. So you can go above and beyond 25 and 30. And your body will eventually, you might have a little bit GI distress initially, but your body eventually kind of adapts to it, because the gut bacteria are going to be, they're going to get more efficient at actually digesting the fiber. So it will eventually adapt. So you could definitely go above and beyond. So again, like, fiber is implicated in a lot of health benefits. So things like lower incidences of type 2 diabetes, stroke, heart disease, especially colon cancer. And it's really important, you know, in the body when you're digesting it, it actually will lower your glucose levels. It kind of slows the spike in blood sugar, because it's actually going to kind of bind with some of the sugar as well as the cholesterol in the food that you're eating, and prevent it from kind of giving you blood sugar spikes, and also preventing some of the cholesterol uptake in your body. So it's shown to be associated with kind of a reduced LDL cholesterol, which is what they call the bad cholesterol, and then promotes good cholesterol, so HDL cholesterol. And then the last little bit is that it's important for gut health. So you're giving food to the gut bacteria in your body, and your gut bacteria is a huge component of what they're finding to be associated with a lot of different types of health benefits, from obesity, even to mood stabilizations, to diabetes, to cancer, to all these types of things. So it's really important that you're feeding your gut bacteria well, because they're not only you know, keeping you healthy, but they're also breaking down your food. They're making vitamins, as I mentioned before. So very, very important. And as a general kind of physical component of the food, fiber is going to fill you up. So it kind of slows down stomach emptying, because it kind of works a little bit harder to get out of your system. So it increases satiety a little bit longer, so you stay full longer, which is really, really important. Okay. All right, so a little bit about canned versus fresh versus frozen. So obviously, in general, fresh produce that is picked at peak maturity is gonna offer the most amount of vitamins and minerals, and it's probably gonna taste the best as well. But as soon as you pick that vegetable from the field, the nutrients are gonna start to degrade. And you know, you think about it, maybe takes 1 to 2 weeks, unless you're buying locally, for the produce to be transported from the farms to the supermarkets, and then you purchase it, and then maybe it sits in your fridge for a while. So there could be, you know, circumstances where actually maybe buying a frozen vegetable that's then blanched and at, you know, peak ripeness and then frozen could be a better way to go than this broccoli that's been sitting in your fridge for 3 weeks. And so you know, as well as, so canned is kind of probably would be the last, the third best one in terms of the nutrient composition, just because you do use a lot, you lose a lot whenever you heat the produce that you're putting into the can, and then it's sitting in this liquid. So like your water soluble vitamins are actually leaching into the water that the vegetables are sitting in. So you could get some of those back by drinking the water or something, but most people don't. They usually drain it before they eat it. So water soluble vitamins like C and B, those have high losses in things like canned vegetables, and a little bit in frozen, because you are blanching the frozen vegetables as well. But it really, there's a huge range from what research has shown, just because different companies use different methods for freezing versus canning. And so even there's variety even within frozen vegetables as well. And, you know, additionally, there's further losses whenever you're actually cooking everything and using it again. So you have kind of this buildup of losses because if you're cooking it in water, you're going to lose more out into the water that you're cooking it in. If you're just the heat will kind of destroy some of the vitamins and minerals in it as well. So aside from, you know, the nutrient losses, though, you also want to think about the culinary applications of some of these things. So the texture of canned and frozen vegetables for a lot of people just like totally turns them off. And to me, there's definitely certain vegetables that I will just never buy frozen, because I think it's really, really hard to find a use for them. Like frozen Brussels sprouts they've got to be one of the worst things ever. But things like frozen spinach and like frozen leafy greens, I find to be really useful, because they're so easy to throw into a stew or to like a quiche like this, and you really don't notice any difference in terms of quality or anything like that. Like stir fries, even using them in like hummuses. So if you thaw it a little bit and then blend it in with like your chickpeas, you can use them that way. And yeah, so, and it's just a few different important considerations, not only nutrient, but obviously how you're going to use them as well. I mean, roasting and steaming some of these frozen or canned vegetables just really isn't the way to go.
Emily, do you have any thought on home canned vegetables like tomatoes and health aspects? Is there a difference in home canning?
Honestly, you're doing the same process as what they would in a you know, at a manufacturer. Like if you're heating it to sterilize it and you're putting it into something that has water in it, you're still going to have the nutrients that lose it. So I think it would be probably pretty similar in terms of nutrient losses. In terms of quality, it might be a little bit different, maybe because your tomatoes, if they're from your garden, they're a little bit better before you go to can them. But yeah, I think it would be a similar kind of thing. But still, I mean, that all being said, it's not like you lose everything. You know, you have frozen vegetables and canned vegetables. They're super economical. They're like super, you don't have to worry about wasting them, because canned vegetables last forever. Frozen vegetables last forever in the freezer. So they're a really great way to still get a lot of your nutrients if you're not into buying fresh produce or you're afraid that it's going to go to waste. I definitely am not going to say don't, buy canned or frozen. The only thing to watch out for with the canned, obviously, is like the sodium and some of the sugars that they might add as well. Because the weird thing is that they'll add sugar to canned corn or canned peas, which is really strange. So you just got to kind of look out for that a little bit. And then as a final, well, not quickly, but there hasn't been a huge amount of research on kind of the nutrient differences between, say, buying organic versus conventional. There was a newer study that did find, I think it was around 2017, 2016, that found that organic and conventional vegetables, they do offer similar levels of many nutrients, but there are a little bit differences in the antioxidants, the special compounds that I talked about before, the phytochemicals. So organic fruits and vegetables do tend to have a little bit of a higher antioxidant activity. And they kind of speculate that maybe this is because, so plants make these compounds whenever they to protect themselves from people that might eat them, or insects or diseases and things like that. In organic crops, because you're not protecting them with these pesticides, they actually have to fight off more of these bugs naturally. So maybe in an organic field, they're being chewed on more, they're being disturbed a little bit more, so they're producing more of this these antioxidant compounds in general. And then obviously organics will have that lower level of pesticides, so that's aside from nutrients, something that you might want to consider in terms of what am I going to do by organic or conventional. But in terms of nutrients, a lot of studies just really haven't shown a huge difference. And there's also really no single organic or conventional production system. So like some organic crops will get some organic fertilizer and some don't, and some have a lot of natural pesticides and some don't. So like even within the fields of organic and conventional, there's a lot of variation in there. So it's kind of hard to really know what you're comparing in the end. And in terms of overall diet, like clinical studies on the impact of eating organic on like human disease or human outcomes really just hasn't been done. So we don't really know a lot about that. So in general, I say, if you're going to buy organic and local I mentioned before, maybe it's good because, there's less in terms of sustainability, it might be a little bit better, and organic might be a little bit better. But in terms of nutrients, I don't think there's going to be a huge amount of difference. And then what I will say as a final kind of note is that the Environmental Working Group releases its Dirty Dozen, which is a list of the 12 fruits and vegetables with the highest contamination levels. So if you are concerned about pesticide use, then there are certain vegetables that you can buy that have been shown to have the highest amounts of contamination. So maybe you do want to buy those organically. And they also offer a Clean 15, which are fruits and vegetables that are lowest in pesticides. So you can buy those because it might not really matter if you're buying those organic or conventional. So, but in terms of nutrients, there hasn't been shown to be a lot of difference between organic and conventional. Do you have any questions? Oh, that's a lot. No? Okay. All right, so now we'll get into cooking. As long as I have everything cut here. Okay. So I'm gonna start by doing my garlic and my onion with a little bit of olive oil. And we're just gonna cook that until it smells nice and they brown a little bit.
So Emily, on our dining page, there is a vegan version of this. Is that correct?
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me. So I put the vegan version on, which is a little bit, it's very different in terms of the process. So I'm doing the vegetarian version today, but the vegan version uses silken tofu, which silken tofu is kind of a magical product. You can use it in a lot of vegan desserts, so like vegan puddings. You can incorporate it into baked goods to make vegan baked goods because it binds and it gives a really nice creamy texture. But for the vegan one, it's actually pretty easy because you're just combining all of your ingredients into like a blender or a food processor, blending it all up except for your bread and your spinach, and then just kind of putting your bread on the bottom of your pan, putting your spinach on the bottom of your pan, and then pouring the mixture, which is like flour, silken tofu, you can use any type of flour, it could be gluten-free as well, and then the non-dairy milk of your choice, and some spices, and then you're putting that over the bread and the spinach, and you're just baking it for the time that I have in that recipe. It's super easy. You only use like 2 pots and pans, and it's delicious.
So I just posted the web page where that updated recipe. So both the vegetarian but non-vegan version and the vegan version are listed. Okay.
Yeah. I tested that one earlier this week, and it was delicious. So it is good. You could also try to use firm tofu. I don't think it might be a little bit, it won't be as creamy, but it'll still hold together well. Okay, so we're gonna let that cook a little bit. So I have in my bowl here the spices, There's like some cayenne, some nutmeg. I think I also added a little bit of herbs for this one that wasn't in the recipe. Just kind of freeformed it a little bit. And my milk. So whatever milk you would like. I use almond milk. You can use oat milk or regular milk. All good.
Is there any ratio? You talked a little bit about freelancing. This is a recipe that's really open to you kind of putting in whatever you like, but are there any ratios of milk to other things, for example, or?
I don't know if I have specific ratios in mind. I mean, you definitely don't want to, you can play with pretty much everything else in terms of like substituting different ingredients, but in terms of the amounts, like you want to keep it, because the eggs and the milk and the bread make up such a huge portion of the dish for the right consistency. You want to keep those ratios the same. So like the 6 eggs, the 2 cups of milk, the 8 ounces of bread. But you can always swap in different types of vegetables, or use nutritional yeast instead of the cheese that I'm using, because there's not a lot of cheese in it, so it really doesn't bind it. The eggs are really the things that's binding it in this recipe. And if, like, say you hate onions, maybe you use a little bit more spinach or a little bit of another frozen vegetable instead of the onions. Like, it's pretty adaptable in that sense. Okay, so these are cooking. We'll just take them off the heat a little bit. And then I'm just gonna crack my eggs into the milk. So with eggs, you got the whites and the yolks, and eggs got a lot of bad press for a while just because they were the yolks themselves were they have a lot of cholesterol in them as well as fat, so people were all about egg whites and all of that stuff. But a lot of research has been finding that it's not really dietary cholesterol that has a huge impact on blood level cholesterols. A lot of it now is saturated fat that has an impact on blood cholesterol levels. I mean, obviously a little bit of dietary cholesterol will have impact on blood levels, but not as much as like saturated fat will. And even people, it's just crazy. Like even people respond differently to cholesterol. So like some people are what they call responders to like things like cholesterol and things like that, because it affects their blood levels a lot more than it will for other people. So some people are just unluckier than others.
I'm going to throw a tip in. One of the things I see that you are doing is you're cracking your egg by hitting it on a flat counter surface, not on the edge of your bowl.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because then you end up, this shell gets into, because like it's inverted, right? So it gets into the yolk and then it's all a mess, or into the egg. Okay, so
crack your egg on a flat surface.
Yes. All right, so I'm just gonna whisk this together until you break up all the yolks. It's gonna get nice and yellow. And this is my frozen spinach, but again, you could use frozen kale. You could use frozen broccoli.
Are you pressing the moisture out of your spinach?
I didn't.
So you just kind of cook it as is?
Yeah, I just kind of thawed it a little bit, but I didn't press any of the moisture out. Okay. It's not as much of a concern in this recipe. There's so much egg and the bread soaks up a lot of the moisture that I'm not too concerned about it. So then I'm adding the onion and the garlic into this as well. I have the recipe for a clove of garlic, but you can always use more if you like more. I like more. Okay. And then, so I'm not going to use all my cheese. I'm going to save a little bit to sprinkle on top. but probably 3/4 of my cheese I'm going to put into my mixture. And then get a spoon for your bread because it's going to be hard to whisk. But this is 8 ounces of bread. I use whole wheat sourdough. So bread, I think, is another thing that people tends to go badly. So you can keep it in the freezer, which is a good way to kind of keep it fresh, you know, kind of use it as you need it. But if you do end up running into stale bread, this is a really good recipe for it, as is like things like bread pudding, French toast, all of that stuff. There's always a way to use it. You never have to get rid of it. Croutons, possibilities are endless. Okay. Then we're just gonna soak all that up, make sure all the bread gets nice and coated. And I have already prepared a 9x9 pan. You can put parchment paper on it, or I just grease mine a little bit so it doesn't stick. Also in the recipe I have that you can add like crumbled tofu or beans. I didn't actually put it in this one currently, just because I'm going to eat this for breakfast, so I didn't want it for my breakfast. But it's easy enough to just add in before, you know, at any point you could just add in the beans or the tofu into this mixture as well. And it'll be a little bit thicker, but it'll still be really good. Okay, so all you do now is just put that into your pan. Smooth it out a little bit. Pretty. And then finish it off with the cheese. So my oven's preheated at 350, so that's the temperature that you want. And this will go in for about 35 minutes. And then I put aluminum foil over it just so that the top doesn't burn, because it is in there for a little bit of time. So aluminum foil is going to prevent it from burning. Okay. So whenever it's ready, I'll show you. It'll bake up pretty firm. Can you see that? It'll bake up pretty firm. It'll get kind of brown. And then you'll know when it's ready. You touch it and the egg won't be mushy anymore. The milk won't be mushy anymore. It'll be a pretty firm, solid piece.
Beautiful. And what, roughly how many minutes would you recommend?
35 minutes.
35 minutes.
Yeah.
Terrific. And if you kind of jiggle the pan and the middle is still a little loosey-goosey,
Yeah.
you should give it a few more minutes?
Yeah, I would definitely let it totally set. So it should be fairly firm whenever it's ready to eat. You don't want to eat any raw eggs.
Beautiful. Does anybody have questions for Emily? I got comments. So what are some other variations that you like to do for
with this recipe?
Add-ins, yeah.
So I like the tofu and like the bean one just because it has more protein, it adds a little bit more texture to it. Different vegetables could be good. So like adding peppers or something with a little bit more color just like aesthetically makes it more pleasing. And you can try different types of bread. So I like sourdough a lot because it has a very distinctive flavor. It's like sour and tangy and it adds a really nice kick to it. But you could use, I've used like different types of breads in it before, like rye breads, which are a little bit heartier. That's kind of some of my favorite little mix-ins. And the vegan one actually was one that I tested for this purpose, and I actually really like it. It turns out really nice.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And it's good for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's like the perfect.
Yeah. And I would guess you could customize it kind of depending on which meal you're going to aim for. Any veggies that you'd avoid?
Oh. Huh. Honestly, not really. I could see a lot of different things working. I was going to say potatoes, but I think even if you pre-cook the potatoes and add them in, I really think even those would be good. Yeah, I think you could try it with anything and you'd have success. I mean, I'm not sure, like, yeah, I don't know. I think it could be good. I think anything would be good.
I agree. I'm trying to think through, and I
Yeah.
can't think of anything that that would cause a worry either.
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe like something that releases a lot of water, like a squash or something, but.
Yeah, zucchini or maybe if it's free kind of. So one tip for folks is that if you do something like shred zucchini or squash and you put just a little bit of salt on it, it helps draw the moisture out. So those high moisture vegetables then don't affect things like if you were making a veggie lasagna or the strata, that would pull some of that moisture out. What's the texture supposed to look like before it goes in the oven?
Yeah, I saw that. Let me get this out and show you.
We're going to pull it out of the oven just a second.
So it really depends on, it's pretty, thick and chunky, but it is also wobbly and like it is still a liquid, obviously. So it still moves around in the pan. And if you have the tofu or the beans in it, it's going to be chunkier, but it's still got movement,
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Sure. All right. Well, it sounds like a delicious breakfast for the holiday weekend.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoy it, and I thank everybody for joining us. And maybe we'll see some of you on the 3 o'clock class where Chef Breslin is teaching us about some basics of baking. But otherwise, this recording will be posted shortly on the HUD's website.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.